In this video, we're going to look at a new way to make things loop in Java, and that's going to be using something called a while loop. So to show this, I have two different classes set up right now. On the left, I have a class called Exploring For Loops, which demonstrates how you can use for loops to make things repeat. So first I have a loop here that will print out the word hi 9 times, because this loop executes 9 times, not 10 because it's not equal to 10. Down here I have a loop that will add up all the numbers from 1 to 9 and then print out that sum. And then last but not least, down here I have a method called a factorial that takes in a parameter and it multiplies together all the numbers from 1 up to n and returns that product. And that value gets printed out up here. So if I were to run this right now, hopefully we'll get the output that we would expect, and that's going to be hopefully 9 highs, the sum of the numbers from 1 to 9, and then the factorial of 5. And those appear to be correct. Here's my 9 highs, the number 45, which is the sum of the numbers from 1 to 9, and then the 5 factorial, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, is 120. So over here I'm going to try to write the exact same code, but using a while loop. So with a while loop, the difference is going to be your counter variable that we've been using to kind of dictate how the loop is running will be declared kind of by itself. And then instead of writing for, we're going to write the word while, and then parentheses. And inside the parentheses, we're going to put the same condition that we had for the for loop. In the brackets, we're going to do two statements. The first one's going to be the printout that we had, and then also the increment. And so the life cycle of this loop is kind of the same as the for loop. We declare I to be 1. While I is less than 10, we print out the word hi. I increases by 1. We go back around the loop. 2 is less than 10. We print out hi. I goes to 3. We go back around the loop. It's the same thing that the for loop does. It's just organized in a different manner. Instead of having everything in the signature here, we have it kind of split out vertically. To show you what happens when I run exploring while loops, hopefully we still see 9 highs. And there they are. There are the 9 highs. So that's the first example. I'm now going to implement the exact same strategy for adding up the numbers from 1 to 10. So for this algorithm I need a sum variable. And I also need this variable that I'm using as a counter for the for loop. The problem is I can't write this because in my code above I've already declared I. So I'm just going to reuse the variable I and set it to have the value of 1, so without writing the type. From here, everything else is pretty much the same. I start a loop, I keep I less than 10, and inside the loop I'm going to increase I and do the increment. Now the way that a while loop can be different than a for loop, and this could be useful, is in a for loop this increment always comes after the increase of sum. There's no way really that you can make this increment happen before increasing the sum. But in this while loop, it'd be very easy to do. I would just move this here and put it before the sum increases. What this would mean is now my sum would be different. It'd be adding up the numbers from 2 to 10, not 1 from 9. So that may be not what you want, and it also is probably not a good idea because it makes it hard to understand what your code does. But if you want that flexibility, that's something that a while loop gives you. And so let me run this to make sure it's working. And oh, I didn't print out the sum. That would be helpful. Let me try that again. And hey, look, there's 45. So same strategy. All right, so the last example we're going to look at is the factorial function. So let me go ahead and write that in, public static and factorial. It takes a number parameter that we're going to process. I need a product variable. And then I also need my integer variable, which notice I can reuse I now because I'm in a different block. So that's not a problem. While my I is less than or equal to n, I'm going to increase the product by a multiplication of I, and I have to make sure I increase I by 1. At the very end of this, I just return the product, and then I can use the exact same code I used for exploring for loops here to call my method, put in a number, get the answer, and print it out. So I'm going to run it, we'll see if it works, and there it is. So yay, I've got a printout of the numbers that I wanted and the words, and I'm using, in this case, while loops instead of for loops. But what's important to know is that anything that you can implement with a for loop that you're used to, you can implement with a while loop, and vice versa. So it's more a matter of taste for when you use one versus the other. You'll notice that I will use for loops a lot when I know how many times a loop needs to run. Like this one's going to run 9 times, this one's going to run n minus 2 times. So that, or n minus 1 time, sorry. So that's what I look for when I use a for loop. When we'll find while loops to be more useful is when we don't know how many times the loop needs to run, and we're like, okay, we'll just let it keep going, and then when some condition suddenly magically happens, we stop. So there'll be more on that later. Right now, the important thing to know is how to read a while loop, understand the structure of it, and understand that it is just an equivalent way of looping code to a for loop, and you can use whichever one you'd like. So hopefully this made a lot of sense.